when you are not the only residents in your home. When my grandparents bought their house for a family of 10, my grandpa found a fake wall upstairs. He tore it down to make more room for the family. Behind the wall were children's clothes and play toys, almost like someone just left everything in a hurry and left. My mom told me stories of sitting in her room and something circling the walls around her sounding like wallpaper being torn. When she moved out, my aunt moved into the same room. She would wake up with pictures she hung up laying on her chest in the morning. My cousins also have stories of hearing footsteps coming up the stairs and stopping outside their door in the middle of the night. I still don't go upstairs there because it's always cold and I get weird vibes. Even in my adult life I have scary dreams that take place there. Did you do it? Camping in the desert in Utah, I was a wilderness guide and lived out of my truck, so camped nearly every night. I was totally used to weird noises, twigs cracking, etc. But one night it was extremely calm and quiet, just a weird vibe in the air. A couple friends and I were on BLM land in Utah near Moab, and we had just put out the fire and laid our bags out. Just as I was starting to fade out, something grabbed me by my wrists and jerked my arms straight up into the air. I sat up immediately and two of my friends bolted up at the same time. We all had it happen to us, and we couldn't explain it. Nothing else happened, but still makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up when I think about it. While at university my friends and I ran out of booze. Hardly any shops were open because it was late on, so the only option was to walk the mile or so to the nearest 24-hour supermarket. Between the supermarket and the dorms we lived in was just row after row of suburban houses. As we were walking down one road, we passed a field with a large campfire and some people riding horses around it. There were people playing musical instruments, and general sounds of a good time going on. The horses and fire, and the lanterns which were dotted about, gave it a very old-fashioned feel. Maybe 5 minutes after passing the field, now walking past houses again, one of my friends commented on how weird and out of place that gathering of people had been. My other friend and I had been thinking exactly the same thing. Curiously we turned around and walked back to find out exactly what was going on. There was nothing there. Not just no people or horses, there was no field, just more and more houses. Even though we were absolutely certain we were on the right road, as we'd simply turned around, we walked up and down the neighboring roads too. We found nothing. We weren't drunk, though we'd had some drinks, and yet I've got absolutely no idea what happened that night. Let's just turn the bed around. 4 years ago, I lived in a very large farmhouse that was converted into 2 apartments. The house was known as the Old Boys' Home. It was used to house boys with behavioral issues, but was closed due to allegations of molestation. Anyway, I was living with my boyfriend and 3-year-old daughter at the time. My bedroom had a large fireplace that had been boarded up and painted over. I decided to push my bed up against it one day while it became our headboard. That night, around 1 a.m., I heard a small voice saying, "Mom, Mom, Mommy." I sat up in bed but didn't see anything, so I reached over my boyfriend trying to grab my daughter and put her in our bed. I kept feeling around and I was still hearing the voice, but I couldn't feel her. My boyfriend woke up and turned the bedside lamp on asking me, "What the hell are you doing?" I explained that Amelia was trying to get in our bed and I was reaching for her. There was nobody there. My daughter was sound asleep in her room. Then the next night around 1 a.m. again my dog had started to whimper at our door, so my boyfriend got up to take him outside. You know that feeling in a bed when someone lies down next to you, where the bed pushes in and there is a warmth in your back. I felt that, so I assumed my boyfriend had come back to bed. I rolled over, my boyfriend wasn't in the bed and I felt the flu*king bed release pressure. Whatever was laying next to me had gotten up in that second. I moved my bed the next day to the other side of the room and I never had another incident in the 2 years I remained in that house. 5 friendly ghost housemates. When I was very young, we lived in a house that had the usual ghost activity, hearing footsteps, hushed voices in the next room, etc. But the really cool thing was the basement door. It would open on its own, not an inch or two. I mean, it would swing fully open like someone was walking through it. My parents tried locking the door and it would still swing open on its own. By the time I was learning to walk, my dad was concerned I would fall down the steps, so he went down into the basement and just said, to no one in particular, that he had a young daughter upstairs and could they please be careful with the door. Ever since then, the basement door would open, and then slowly shut on its own. 6. Call from the dead. My grandmother died of brain cancer about 20 years ago. About 2 weeks after she died, I was hanging out over at my parents' place and my mom got a call, no number, no unknown number, just blank caller ID. She answered it, got quiet, hung up and went to her room without saying anything. When I finally got her to talk about it, she said it was her mother, saying she was trapped and please come get her because they wouldn't let her leave, over and over again, and then the phone disconnected. I asked her about it a few years ago and she denied that it happened for a bit and then admitted that it had happened 2 more times that year and then stopped, but she didn't want to discuss it anymore. 7. I can never go home. 2 years ago, I woke up around 1 a.m. thinking, I can never go home again. It was the most intense sense of homesickness I've ever experienced, full of panic and regret. I tried to calm myself down logically, of course, I could. My parents lived just a couple hours away, still in my childhood home. I'd fought hard to get away from the suburb I grew up in, so why this sudden intense longing? The next day, I got a call that my dad had been hospitalized during the night and was in the ICU. He didn't make it out. And while the house is still there, it's not home anymore. 8. A concentration camp scare. A few years ago, we visited my sister who was married to a soldier in the British Army and he was stationed in Germany. She knew I was interested in history, so for a day out we visited Bergen-Belsen, a former Nazi concentration camp. As we were walking around, my sister was pushing the pram with my nephew in it. He was 2 or 3 years old at the time. The thing about Bergen-Belsen is that after the war it was burned to the ground, so it's more or less blank fields. As we walked, we passed a tree when my nephew asked my sister who the kids were behind us. We all turned around and no one was there. My sister asked which kids, and he replied, the ones in the pajamas. Yet again, no kids anywhere to be seen. We all knew for a fact that he has no idea what country he was in, let alone know about the horrible events which occurred at that camp. An old aunt, upon hearing of this a year later, scolded us for taking a child to a place of death, because apparently children can see the dead and that can affect their mental health negatively.